Welcome back to Virtual Shakeup. I'm pleased to introduce Stephen Corrick, CEO of Comexposium in the Americas. Welcome, Steve.
Hi, good afternoon. How are you?
Excellent. Give us a little bit of background. You've got such a diverse, resume that I feel like I wouldn't do it justice.
Oh, that's okay. Well, first of all, I wish that this session was about how to run a successful online event, because I could just say you've done it now, because this has been a great day. I've followed most of it, and congratulations. That's the first thing I wanted to
Thank you.
mention. I was one of those, liberal arts graduates who went out of college and decided I'd sell advertising for a while, bounced into publishing, and then found the world of trade shows because we were in a JV with a trade show company, and ended up in the events/media business for many years, working for Montgomery's in London and Los Angeles, and then found my way to UBM, and most recently, the last few years, to Comexposium, headquartered in Paris. I'm based here in New York. But I've got basically a number of years, I won't say how many, a number of years in B2B events and B2B media. We now call community, but that's it. We'll get onto that subject.
Yeah, we're going to talk about community in a little bit.
Yeah.
So, first of all, everyone, there is another poll. It's our last one, so please go look in the polling section. And the question is, what are your top priorities for 2021? But back to Steve. Steve, so what I think would be very interesting for us to dive into today is, we touched on something that is, not all events are poised to go into virtual, right? You might have one where the audience it's just so large or disparate and changes all the time to its all product specific, and it's really just a trade show, no content. And then you brought up a great example of one of Comexposium's event, which is like a food and experience event. Tell us a little bit more about your thoughts with regard to which events are not great for online.
Sure. Well, I don't know if any are not great, but here's what I'll say is that, we're one of the larger independent organizers. So we run about 140 events, I think, around the world. And yes, we have a strong footprint in food and wine and agriculture and security and retail and fashion. And we do definitely have some very large events. We have, a food event in Paris, which is 1.5 million feet and 7,200 exhibitors. And we run the gamut from that all the way through conferences to hosted buyer models. So we are a face-to-face foremost company, but we believe in all kinds of mechanisms. So I think that there is a challenge with those larger events, and what do you do with them in terms of an online experience? And I think some of that is evolving. It has evolved over many years as well. Where I absolutely accept that this time the COVID experience is fundamentally different to anything else. But there is some hint of deja vu here with, those of us that go back at least to 9/11 and 2008, where we were told that, no one will ever travel to events again. Business travel will be off by X%. So there is some familiar tones here. And so some of it has already migrated to some extent. But I do think the larger expo-driven event, which is primarily about leads and connections and face-to-face networking, there's a challenge there for sure, as opposed to a deep dive, content-rich, let's say something in the pharmaceutical sector, perhaps, where you're going through maybe even continuing education credits. I think that's just a different model. Both can work. Both have to work.
Right. No, for sure. Well, with that said, here's an interest. Comexposium is all face-to-face, and i.e. pre-COVID. And you actually said something very interesting in one of our Level Up conversations is you need to focus on the future versus trying to fix the now. What are your plans now for 2021?
Well, that's great. In the short term, we've been focusing on, many of the same things the people on this in this meeting would have been doing. The tactical things, shifting venues, dealing with vendors, communicating. Communication has become even more important. Setting expectations internally, externally. We've been doing a lot of that. But as we look forward, and this is not a throwaway statement. Looking after the health and safety of employees and attendees and exhibitors and partners is still foremost in our minds. So anything we're planning going forward has to keep that in top of mind. I had one of those very sort of obvious but epiphany moments in the summer when, at that point, if you can think, and I heard you one of the other sessions, Heather, talk about May being sort of, I don't know, like 100 years ago, the month of Mayfeast. Well, way back then, if anyone can remember, we were in a situation where the western half of the country looked pretty okay, and we had an event we were planning for Phoenix in September, I think it was, and we were thinking, well, okay, that looks okay. And then one of our own people said, I'm not sure I feel comfortable even going to that event. And then I thought to myself, well, if he or she doesn't feel comfortable going, how can we be asking exhibitors and attendees to show up at that time? So I think that's still top of mind. But I think a lot of it going forward is about management being common sense, leadership being common sense. We're planning for every scenario, and I'm sure most of the major organizers are. I think our CFO may be logged in today, and he will know that we've now probably done 5 different budgets from the ground up, just exercise after exercise. So we're planning for a number of scenarios in 2021. We think that the most likely scenario, based on the information we have, is that there would be some kind of, hybrid opportunities, true hybrid opportunities, beginning by the second half of the year. I'm referring to the US now. Obviously, as a global company, we've had some benefit of seeing what's happening in China, in Europe. Again, if you think May sounds like a long time ago, it's now somewhat ironic to me that going back to January, I sent, I think, 1,000 masks to our office in Shanghai, because at that time they were in the depths of it and we hadn't felt anything. So I think it's about planning for every contingency, but I think the most likely scenario suggests that by the second half of 2021, we will see events, albeit more domestic in nature, as they are in China, more regional in nature, as we expect here in the US, will be progressing.
Okay, great. Well, it sounds like with that strategy then is that your live event or hybrid event format is you're going forward, but it's actually going to be, they'll be smaller, more regional, but you may do more of them. So like a brand, a franchise could be, instead of like the European one or the Asian one, it's, well, this will be in South China, this will be in North China, or this is going to be in Australia or in Europe. Let's dive into community, because this is the buzzword du jour. Everyone wants to develop community, and everyone thinks of community differently, but you have a really, really interesting point of view on this.
Well, possibly. I'll certainly give you my point of view, and this is, being all sides of this. I don't know that any of us have got it figured out, but for me, building community, is obviously about building trust. It's about creating space for people to stay connected and facilitating an authentic dialogue. I mean, not dissimilar to what you've done here today, Heather, obviously. I believe there's plenty of opportunities for organizers in the community sort of realm, if you will. However, often when you hear, often in these meetings, or any meeting for that matter, when you hear the question, what about community? People will say, well, community is 24/7, 365, etc. And I believe it can be. It certainly can be. But I'm not convinced it always is, or it always has to be for those of us in the event organization space. Community to me is something. It's one of those things, it when you see it, you feel it. It's hard to sort of. It's not tangible in some ways. We've got communities, and I think we spoke about this, Heather, at one time, that genuinely meet once a year, but it's a real community. So I think about, for example, our security meeting that we have once a year in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. That's as true a community as I could ever speak to. They know each other well. They look forward to the trip. It's on their calendars. It's really important. But that community only really exists when we bring it together. Now, there are touch points. There's advisory boards. There's other ways that we talk about throughout the year. And we have, great communities in fashion and food and franchising. But we're often the facilitator as much as the organizer. Here at Comexposium, and I'm sure that many on the call in the meeting will feel they do the same thing. We're in partnership with a number of associations and media entities, and we have been for many, many years in North America and around the world. In that community, the association, the media partner, ourselves, we all play an integral role in that community. Sometimes they don't just sponsor the event, they actually have a real stake in delivering it, whether that stake is delivering content or they could be a true business partner, actually have skin in the game. But they deliver what they deliver, and those relationships have seen us through 100+ years of running events, and we feel that it works. We're all part of the ecosystem. That's the way I look at it, and in many cases we can strengthen those communities. In some of our cases, the brands, have certainly increased our touch points during this time with COVID. That's logical. We can't meet face to face, so we're doing more online because we want to be with our customers, with our attendees as much as possible. I do think it's a challenge for any event, larger events particularly, to simply say, okay, now we're going to be in the community business, what we decided to be. Unless you had strong elements, I believe, of community pre-COVID, that's going to take some time. You can't just suddenly switch it on. And also, we recognize very often, you reference food, for example, but it's true of all our communities. When we bring those communities together, they're really the combination of a lot of sort of micro communities. I think of it, you went back through my history a little bit. I think of, I was part of a small company at the time out in Santa Monica, California, called Canon Communications, which became a UBM acquisition. And we were in the medical device space. That was our sweet spot. It was a great business to be in. And then we decided over time that maybe we could bring in other verticals, aerospace, military, other sort of regulated industries, electronics generally. And it really worked. And we brought them together under a large tent in Anaheim, California, here in New York and other places. But that community only really existed when we brought it together, because there was no real reason for an engineer from Medtronic to be alongside an engineer from Raytheon in the quote unquote normal world. But we brought them together. They became a community. They networked together, and suddenly you had all these engineers exchanging things. So I believe that we play. I think that sometimes as event organizers, we're seen as the people that just we rent the space and we sell concrete, and community's over there somewhere. And then others will tell you, well, no, we are absolutely the association that runs the event. We're all about community. And I think, without dodging the question, Heather, I think it's somewhere in between for the larger event organizers, and it has been for a while.
Yeah, I to your point, I think it depends on the market. It like the way you described that one event, it's always on their calendar. Two, also, in order to support a community, you actually have to have a means to do so. Website, and you need people to engage. So I do think it would be challenging for certain organizers. Now, with that, you mentioned you have been doing things online for your various franchises. What can you tell us a little bit of what those are and any new tools you've had to invest in order to activate?
No, that's a great question. So we run franchise expos, we run food expos, as says security, and also fashion, and they've all run online events. Our franchise expos have run 2, and the others have all run at least 1. This is, again, this is not prescriptive, but where I came from, I told them all, do what you want with the platforms. Go out. I'm not going to tell you which platform to use. I have my own biases. Do what you want. Some were homespun, some were a little bit homespun, and so we've certainly, used the opportunity to test things and learn new skills. So, we've augmented our online reach through those tools, and we've used, a variety of tools, frankly, to make that happen. And many of the people in this meeting will have used them. We've done online matchmaking. We're now doing more newsletters online and so forth. It's interesting that, in an environment where we can't deliver our core business, we've actually ended up busier than ever, frankly, because we're all learning things and doing things differently. So there's a range of sort of tools that we're using to do that. The other thing, as we talk about investment and augmenting, again, what's been important to me is to understand, our existing tools. Are we getting the full benefit for this somewhat new world from our existing tools? So, candidly, we've got CRMs and database systems and all the rest of it. I'm not sure that they were being fully utilized the way that we could even pre-COVID. So I think that the opportunity for all of us is to look at your existing stack, if you will, and see how it works together. Because I'm being honest and saying, I guarantee that maybe ours was running at 70, 80% of its utility, if I'm being generous. So what more can we do? So really, I mean, a variety of tools we've been using. I think that, platforms are really important, a really important decision. But I also encourage the teams not to end up in paralysis of debating for weeks and weeks which platform. Clearly, credit to Borella here today. This is a fantastic environment. But to me, and again, this is just a personal opinion, the platform to me is a bit more, and the technology plays the role a little bit like that baseball umpire or soccer referee, best used when you hardly notice them. In other words, they work perfectly. If you're talking about the technology a lot, you're not talking about, the core value that you're bringing to that community.
Yeah. That's another thing I noticed a lot in the beginning is that it was the cool factor of the functionality of the platform versus what the business needs to deliver, right? And then all of a sudden you'd invest in the platform. You're like, oh, wait a minute, but we can't do that. Right. We have the results from the poll.
We do. So the question was, what are the top priorities for event organizers? And some interesting results here. So producing in-person events is just 17%, perhaps because of the change in the industry, or maybe we've moved on from saying, I wish we could go back to normal. Building and monetizing a community, 29, equal with creating a 365 marketplace, which you were talking about earlier. 38% want to deliver more value through data, but most people have got to transform their business model.
Yeah, for sure.
Fair enough.
Do you see, just with regard to data, do you have what do you feel your strategy will be in 2021 and beyond?
Well, I thought Stefan's session earlier today was excellent. I'm very interested. We've got discussions underway, basically how to improve our database management, building actionable personas. All of that, I think, is now, it was always there, but it wasn't as much as the forefront as it will be moving forward. So I think it's about moving with greater speed, with greater focus on database management generally, and a range of tools to support that. I think that one of the nasty secrets, I think, of that, certainly the larger event organizers, is that a lot of these conversations have happened for many years, but in the end, the event director will often go back to the default of bombarding their database, whatever that means, messages, until you submit and register for the event. Let me email you 20 times. So I think it's about database management. I also think it puts pressure on, not pressure, but focus on messaging as well. I think, again, I think large organizers are guilty of repeating the messages of we're the biggest, we're the best, it's X thousand exhibitors, we've been around since 19 whatever. And I think that's only gets you so far. The potential attendee, they need that fear of missing out. What are they going to get out of those 1, 2, 3 days, online or in person? It's got to be more than what it has been in the past. So I think it's about absolutely database management, but I also think it's about message quality as well.
That's actually, he just brought up a few really important points, which I think lead into my next question, which is the new skill sets. What if you had to say the new skill sets your team needs to embrace, like now, in order to be successful in 2021 and to support your plan, what would they be?
The new skill sets. That's a great question. I think that as we've been having this conversation, one thing's popped into my head that and as leaders, as we sometimes have this luxury of not knowing all the answers, but you better have good questions. So I'm just going to backtrack a little bit and say that the question that's sticking in my head right now is that many years ago, well, not that many years ago, a few years ago, I was walking around a major convention center with the CEO of UBM at the time, and it was a pretty successful show we were running. And he turned to me and he said, "So what are you going to do in the future, Steve?" I said, "What do you mean?" "Well, your days of selling dimly lit 10 by 10 booths in these cavernous centers are coming to an end. So you better think about it." So I've been thinking about that a lot, and I've never quite answered it, but it's coming into more clarity right now. So to answer, I mean, the skill sets have to be, those database marketing skill sets, obviously. On the marketing side, they're going to be much more about, the term digital marketing actually is going away, and it should go away. It's really just marketing nowadays. So, those marketing skills of honing in on all of those things that some things we've touched upon, personas and so forth, all of those skills in the marketing sector have to be first and foremost. If we talk about community, then content skills. Larger organizers haven't typically overly invested, I should say, in content skills. So I think that will come to the fore. And on the sales front, and this is as much it's not so much skills as it's more about, if you will, just the mental blocks that take place. It's a cultural thing. It's interesting to me that the same salesperson who has no problem asking an exhibitor to take a $6,000 booth, which actually triggers a $20,000 investment for that company by the time they built the booth and T&E, are really stuck on asking for half of that amount for an online experience with the same company. So I think we've got a cultural block here on the sales side in some cases with people who are frankly used to selling concrete and selling as conceptually. I mean, in the end, you're selling connection to an audience. I get that it's different or can be perceived as different, but so in sales and content and marketing, clearly on the operations side, people need to be able to run online events. I mean, that's a given. And I say that's a given. There are skills behind that, real, true skills. So,
just to recap, database marketing, it shouldn't be digital marketing. It should be marketing, sales, and content. Yeah. So essentially, almost the 2/3 of what the team was.
So that polling question was correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. So we have some questions from the audience, and the first one is: do you see the in-person conferences dead in 2021 onwards? And they will turn, I guess, to translate this, 100% virtual, trade fairs and expos logistically making more sense to be in person? I'm not quite sure I get this question, but let me.
Okay.
Do you? I guess.
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's 2021 onwards, but the simple answer. Well, first of all, let me just preface all of this by saying that that old quote of predictions are very difficult, especially about the future. But having said that. At some point, live events are coming back. I can't tell you if it's going to be September of 21 or May of 21. I mean, coming back, they are already back in China, and I understand that China is a different market, but there's an appetite. And if you look at the pictures that are coming back from those shows, they are busy. Yes, everyone's wearing a mask. Hopefully, they're socially distanced, but they look very much as you would expect. So the in-person events are coming back for sure. What I would say, that's a simple answer to the question. What I would say is that similar to 2008, similar to 2001, similar to any other major disruption that you can name, you better have an event that is strong. So you better be the number one or a fast number two. I do believe some events will go away. Those will be the number 3, 4, 5, 6 events, whatever it may be. That's just the natural shakeout after any major disruption in any business. But live events will come back. We have a need to do business face-to-face. Not all of it is transactional. It will certainly be augmented by these online opportunities, but in-person events will come back.
I actually agree. I think you brought up something, the 9/11 analogy, which is it was all things were changed forever and then things got back. It really, people need to be. Yeah.
Well, just quickly on that point, I know we're running out of time, Heather. It's a great point because I don't pretend to know aviation the way that the folks who were on earlier know aviation. But if I remember this, I read this that after the 9/11 shock, many people the month before was the highest in the U.S. monthly air travel. I think about 65 million passengers or flights. Forgive me. And obviously, there were many people who said they'd never travel again. By 2005, it took 4 years. We were up over 70 million monthly flights, whatever that stat was. Now, that's true. But if you only look at that, you're only seeing part of the picture because within those 4 years, the industry had dramatically changed. Low-cost carriers, people actually sold middle seats. I remember the days when the middle seat being occupied was strange. But after that time, so inventory went down, low-cost carriers. The industry was radically changed, but people flew again. Mm-hmm. So that's an analogy here. I can't tell you how exactly it will be changed. It will be a changed industry, but people will go to events again.
Right.
That's my dangerous prediction about the future.
I wish we all knew, but I have to tell you, I think the biggest thing I've learned from 2020 is it's like what is today is definitely not guaranteed to be the same thing within 24 hours. So thank you so much, Steve. I know we have a lot more questions, but we are out of time. And I'm just delighted that you were able to join us today.
Thank you, and congratulations again.